Hello, it's layperson Lisa with a reflection on the readings for the 7th Sunday in Ordinary Time. So, this weekend at the Retreat Center, there is a women's retreat about beauty. And I think that today's gospel from Luke just speaks to what it is to have inner beauty, to love the people that are hard to love, to give of yourself without expecting anything in return, to not judge, to not condemn, to just be a gift of self to all of those that we encounter. And that is where our inner beauty shines, because that is, Jesus is the source of that. And it is about the virtue of magnanimity. So to have this greatness, this great reflection within yourself, because it is you, it is Jesus who's being reflected outside of yourself. So to not, so I read this great passage in a book about how in the gospel it talks about how forgive and you will be forgiven. And we're called to be like the saints, to not even take any offense in the first place, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And for me, that is something that I really struggle with. I am just extra sensitive sometimes because of maybe what people say or what people do. But this just helped me to realize that God is calling me to live a life of magnanimity, to allow Him to just shine from within me, because He lives within my heart. But so often I am not allowing Him to shine from within, to radiate the inner beauty that is Him. I'm being more turned inward. I'm being more thinking about that offense instead of like, okay, who's Jesus calling me to be? And I remember hearing about Saint Therese of Lisieux, who there was a sister in her convent that she just didn't care for. And she went out of her way to be nice to this sister, to just treat her better than she treated anyone else. In fact, her sister, who was in the same convent, like said to her, like, hey, it's like you love her more than you love me, and I'm your sister. But it was because, and I always thought that was like, I couldn't do that. That's like being phony. Like, that's not being authentic. Like, if I don't like somebody, how am I supposed to be fake and pretend that I do? And it was something that I wrestled with for quite a while, until I realized one day in prayer, like, Saint Therese was being Jesus to that person who was hard to love inside of her convent. Having trouble with that word today. Convent. She was being Jesus. And I'm like, okay, that's not being fake. I can try to do that with God's grace, with God's help. I can just invite Jesus into those those situations where it's hard to like someone, where I may have felt offensive. Like, no, I'm called to be Jesus to that person. And that's what magnanimity is all about. Just magnifying Jesus by our life, magnifying His love by being a vessel of love, to just allow His graces to flow inside of our heart and outside of the world. It's like the Brandon Lake song, like, into my heart, into my world, pour me out. And that's what we're called. That's who we're called to be. And this, when I was reading about the magnanimity, Jesus brought to my heart, like, okay, I'm not doing that right now. I'm turning inward, and I am not being who He called me to be, which is a person that I don't like. I don't like when I'm that inward person. But it's an act of the will that I can say to Jesus, I choose to be your vessel. I choose to be a person who desires to grow in magnanimity, so that my life may be a magnification of your love, that I may be a vessel instead of a closed off faucet, that I may flow out because of Jesus and not because of myself. And it goes back to last week's readings about trusting in ourselves versus trusting in God. And this just continues this journey where we're called to trust and depend on God in a greater dependence, a greater trust, and to not be so self-reliant. And I'm talking to myself here. And to be his vessel, a flowing faucet instead of a closed off one. So are there areas in your life where God is calling you to be a vessel and you're closed off to it? Allow him to invite him into giving you the grace to have this awareness of who he is calling you to be, so that his beauty may shine into the world because you are willing to say yes to being his vessel.